everybody, and welcome to another hair-raising, fun-filled, expeditious episode of Radiorama, where, as the name implies, I share to work on radios. And today we have, it's not my favorite, but it's close to one of my favorite radios. It's a Zenith AM FM set. I believe this is one of the earlier ones. And I believe they first came out with this model in 1947. It's remarkable because these are some of the few late 40s sets where FM actually works quite well. It's because Zenith partnered with Howard Armstrong, Edwin Howard Armstrong, the inventor of the regenerative circuit, as well as the FM circuit. One man powerhouse, true genius, who got screwed over by RCA, but RCA paid because they went out of business. And, well, they got bought by General Electric in 1986, I believe. But anyway, enough about the history. These, most of the time, work. I'd say this has about a 65% chance of working. That said, I'm going to bring it up on a variac and start off with my amps settings, see if it's going to do anything crazy, like if there's something majorly shorted in there. Actually, let me make sure the thing is on. It wasn't on. That usually helps, you know. All right, let's try this again. All right, it's drawing, and it's not doing anything catastrophic. And we're good. All right, so let's go ahead and bring it up. They're right around 110 volts. I don't think these do not have a pilot light. And I'm going to start off on AM. That's the most likely band to work. So far I'm not hearing anything. That's AM. I think the volume control is dirty. And that's FM. Incredible. Like I said, these things, you got to think about how old this radio really is. 1947. Let's see, I'm not good at math. 57, 67, 77, 87, 97, 2007, 2017. The thing's almost 80 years old, and it still works perfectly fine. Well, it's got a little hum, but, you know, you put aside a modern cell phone / big screen TV for 80 years, drag it out, it's not going to work, and it's not going to be fixable because all the capacitors will have oozed and etched all of the PC boards to nothing, taking out all of the tiny microscopic components. So that's something that future antique electronic restorers are going to have to deal with. And there's probably going to not be near as many replacement parts. Because unlike radios and electronics from this time period, you open them up and they're all the same parts. The same standardized, same sized, same whatever, generic capacitors, resistors, and whatnot, usually soldered in, hand-wired, easy to replace. Since they made billions of tubes, there's still millions and millions out there. So theoretically, you get a radio like this, and if you actually genuinely want to use it every morning as your kitchen radio, you could do it for the rest of your life, no problem, so long as you knew how to fix it. So that's why when I use vintage electronics in my house, I just use them like regular appliances because I can and have fixed them, such as my stereo, which is also getting up there. It's 60-something years old. And I had a resistor burn open. It took me like 10 minutes to fix. Good as new. All right, so here's the back removed. A little word of warning about these sets. These are actual hot chassis sets, meaning this is hot. That's why it has a kind of difficult to remove back. It also has an interlock that removes the power. And if I remember correctly, there are nylon spacers that separate the screws from the chassis, and then the knobs, the shafts themselves, are isolated as well. So it's good physical isolation. It'd be very difficult for someone to shock themselves in this thing. They'd really have to try. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but it'd be stupid if you did it. So maybe Darwin would earn you a prize or something. But to take these two screws out, and the whole thing should slide out in one piece. Okay, so I took the chassis out. This is an interesting set. It has both slug and conventional tuning condenser style tuning. The slugs are for FM. The traditional is for AM broadcast. The fact that this tube still has the original cardboard shield and it's not damaged tells me that tube is probably original. This is a Zenith tube. That's Zenith. These are all Zenith tubes, so it's a good possibility that they're all original. There's some manufacturers that just seem to make sets that were real easy on the tubes for some reason. Either that or maybe this didn't get used as much. Who knows? But we need to take the bottom off, and then we can gain access to the innards and see what's going on. I'm going to bet $10 that nothing's ever been done to it. It's probably all original. Well, as I suspected, it's factory original. No one's been in here. It's the first time this has seen light in almost 80 years. It's an interesting... I've seen a lot of these bumblebee caps fail, but it's weird. It's like that's clearly juice from inside the capacitor. It's come oozing out, and it's coming off the output tube. So that probably explains why I was humming a little bit. It's amazing. Probably the electrolytics are okay, but have to change them anyway. That's just kind of how it goes. There's not many to replace. There's two. See, usually when I get an electrolytic can that looks like it's swelling, you'll see goo coming percolating out of these knockouts behind the leads here. See that square? Usually when I see a capacitor, it's all swollen up and on its way out, you'll have stuff bubbling out of there, but it's not. That is not a scientifically accurate way to determine capacitor health, by the way. It's just something that I kind of noticed. It does have a selenium rectifier, and there's a semi-controversial thing about these, which is there's camps of people that say, oh, I've never had one fail on me. They go for a very long time, and they hardly ever fail. But I've had probably over the years 5 or 6 of them fail on me. And when they do, they stink. Like, stink really bad, which you think, oh, that's funny, it just stinks. Except that smell is also slightly toxic. But the good news / bad news is if you ever have one blow up, you're not going to be you do not want to be in the room because it stinks so bad. So we're going to replace that with a modern diode. A tiny little grain of rice-sized diode is going to replace that huge thing. It's interesting, if these guys get used a lot, they will start to have a little bit of a burned, brownish appearance. This looks brand new. I'm beginning to think maybe the radio didn't exactly have a lot of use. It might have been used for a few years and put away to sit around for a long time. So it could be a low hour set. I don't think it's ever been apart. So like the knob shafts, usually when people put the knobs back on, they force them on and they bend these. And what do we have as far as electrolytic capacitors? I think on these guys usually you have an 80 and a 45 or something, or a 50. No, this is bad camera holding. Sorry, I'm looking for the values. There's square and triangle. What does it say? What a bad place to put it. Well, I've worked on these enough that I'm 99% sure that square shape that's embossed on the side here, which is represented underneath, is 80 microfarads and the other one's 45 or 50. I'll look at the schematic to confirm it, but I'm pretty sure it is. Okay, so let's start the recapping process. So I have it in mind to start with the electrolytics, and so we have these two leads here. The square punch out behind the lead here that indicates it's the square. This is 80 microfarads, this one's 50 microfarads. And everything is chassis ground in this thing. I just noticed something. I didn't see this. Wow. is split in two. So it's no longer a capacitor, it is a resistor. Before I start replacing things, I'm going to get some of these big guys out of the way. So I'm going to replace this paper cap. It's a 0.05 rated cap, and I'm going to replace it with a 0.047 rated at 630 volts. And it's going to be plastic mylar that'll last longer than I'll be alive. Alright, so we got the two electrolytics replaced. I had to run some new wires because the ones that were in it weren't long enough to reach the new capacitors. And I'm definitely going to replace this. I'm looking at it, and it's going to one end of the incoming power. So that's the across the line cap. So we're going to replace that with an across the line cap. Looks like one of these. It's not as well. Basically, this is where this capacitor gets whacked with incoming current, and that's why it cracked open. Okay, so before I test it, I'm going to clean the pots and the contacts on it, including the switch, which seemed to be getting a little sticky. That feels a lot better. Squirt it out a little bit more. And yes, I'm using WD-40. I know some people are like, no, we can't do that. That's terrible. But, you know, it's one of those things where people argue back and forth about it. It's like people that claim you need to replace the selenium rectifiers, which I am one of, and there's other people who claim you don't. You know, whatever floats your boat, whatever you think is safe, whatever you think is going to work, do it. Okay, this is one of these sets where you absolutely should use an isolation transformer because it's always going to be a hot chassis. So let's go ahead and power it up and turn it on. I'm going to work this back a little bit. Now, if you did anything wrong, like put the capacitors in backwards, you would know by now they would be exploding. But they don't seem to be doing anything explodey, so that's a good thing. Is this even on? That's very quiet.
Price for no extra cost. Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency are reviewing reports of such side effects. On the empty backfield. Like them, they said.
That's probably AM.
Related to Ozempic as of June.
If it hadn't been struck yet.
That's probably AM or FM.
Towards the end. Help you every step of the way to get the right that works for you and your family.
Might need to check the...
You covered. Learn more at coveredca.com.
20th Century Studios presents A Haunting in Venice.
Uh-oh.
This Friday. From the world of Agatha Christie.
I hope that speaker's not messed up.
No one shall leave until I know who did it. This Friday. It was skunk. Get tickets now.
I will not be next.
Save on select appliances in-store or online.
Maybe not.
Your tank at your next fill-up to eliminate carbon and varnish deposits. Get 2 bottles of Lucas Fuel Treatment for $10.
Might have some dirty tube sockets, but it's working reasonably well. I don't have the FM antenna. Actually, I didn't have it hooked up, so that's probably why it's not picking up. But let me attach that antenna. That'll probably make a difference. Well, unfortunately, good news, bad news. Good news, FM is actually pretty healthy. Bad news is I think the speaker is deformed.
Beware of RSV.com. Brought to you by Pfizer.
KOIT and HD1 San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose.
Weather brought to you by Scandinavian Designs Furniture.
Yeah,
Extended
Shop Scandinavian designs for even more labor.
The only thing I can think of, maybe the surround has come loose. Sometimes that happens. Luckily, it's a real common speaker size. Like, I can just get another one. I want to make sure it's a good quality speaker because these did sound good, and I don't want to put some piece of garbage in it. In fact, I might have some speakers here that'll work. Well, definitely an unhappy speaker. Let's got a dirty tube socket here. Fudge. There's only one other thing that you can do in a pinch is I'm going to pull the dust cap off and see if there's any debris that's gotten down in there. It appears that some little pieces of metal shavings have gotten down in there. Whether I can get them out of there, I don't know, because that's a magnet. I'm going to get some paper and try to like drag it around the corners here, like go to get down in between the magnetic rod and the coil. See if I can pull those bits out of there. Well, I found another Zenith speaker. It's better, but it's still not perfect.
Public health and data science to improve people's health. It's a field that has become front and center due to the COVID-19 pandemic. There are opportunities here in California to pursue an education in public health informatics and address the increasing need for public health officials.
Well, I don't have any more speakers like this in my stash, so I need to go tomorrow to the museum and get a replacement. I'm going to take this off, take the output transformer off. I'm going to have to find a different way to mount that. I think what I'll do is I'll just use some self-tapping screws and put it like right here or something. That'll be fine. Well, I guess I got carried away and a little bit ahead of myself, but I'm not sure how many videos I need to show you replacing capacitors, because that's mostly what it is. But all those old wax capacitors have been replaced with nice, new, shiny, yellow plastic capacitors, which again will probably not go bad in my lifetime. But even if they did, so what? I need to take care of this. This is the selenium rectifier, but before I do that, I'm going to see if there's any change in improvement with the performance that's now fully recapped. Actually, it did make an improvement. The set is now very sensitive.
That's 833.
Barely turn the knob and it just picks up all kinds of stations. Unfortunately, the speaker does sound like crap, so tomorrow I'm going to go get a replacement and install that, and then it's getting pretty late for me. I'm going to hold off on replacing that today, but at least for now the caps have been all replaced. It's working well. I'll get a new speaker and that'll make a huge improvement. Welcome back to working on the Zenith. It's actually been about 3 or 4 days. I actually went on a weekend trip. I bicycled around Lake Tahoe. And prior to that, I think like we had a big event and sold off probably 75 sets. And they sold off pretty quickly, like basically in a couple hours. And I was looking at it while it was happening. It was like, great, we're raising some funds for the museum. But on the other hand, like, months and months of work just like evaporated. And I know that that's the whole goal is to raise money, but it's like once I collect these things up and they start getting on the shelves at the museum, it's like something to look at and admire. It's like, look, there's all the radios I worked on, and then they disappear. And I got to start all over again. And whenever I get slowly started on rebuilding that supply, it's always kind of depressing to me, and I'm not sure why. So I've been a little like less enthusiastic about working on this one. So I gave it a few days, but I'm back, and we're going to replace this old-fashioned selenium rectifier with a modern diode rectifier, and we are going to need to compensate for the fact that this is not as efficient as a modern diode, and so we're going to put a compensating resistor in there. And I found like a 40 ohm 2 or 3 watt resistor does just fine. I was looking through all my stuff, and I don't have any big what do you call them? These things. And I have this big one, which I think will fit. I'll just put it like, I can use one of the holes. It's already there. That means I could probably just drill right through there, and that would work just fine. And I also got a replacement speaker. I can't remember if I mentioned this in the last episode of the last segment I did, but this is going to need to be bolted down here to this kind of like C-shaped thing. And I need to find a mount for the output transformer, because the original speaker had the output transformer mounted to the speaker, and the new replacement speaker doesn't have a place to do that. So I'm just going to bolt it to the chassis somewhere. It'll be tricky because I don't want to drill through anything here. But what we're going to do is essentially this. So we have a resistor going to the anode of the diode, and then our negative is negative coming in through the other side. And so hopefully that makes sense to some of you who understand electronics. I don't half understand electronics myself, but hopefully you got it. This is the positive. It's even marked here on the old selenium, and by default this is the negative. It's interesting, it's already got like this resistor here. I'm just going to add to it. Alright, so here is our new solid state rectifier. We have our compensating resistor as the positive comes in through here, goes to the anode, and then here we have cathode running off here. I could be wrong about that anode cathode. Like, I can never remember which is which, so correct me if I'm wrong. And I know I'm probably wrong on that. I had a 50-50 chance of guessing. Anyway, you also need to make sure you put this in right. If you put the diode in upside down, you'll get a very nasty surprise. And I'm going to test it again before I mount the speaker. I just want to make sure that nothing's bad is going to happen here. If I wired it in backwards, you'll know instantly. So let's see what happens. It would have done something horrible by now. Just make sure it still works. Let's see.
Download the Odyssey app.
Overdraft fees. Banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/banking. Capital One member.
Seems like it's working. I can't tell how it's going to sound because the speaker's buzzing and vibrating there because it's not mounted in here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that next and find a home for the output transformer. Okay, so we have the new transformer, well, not new transformer, we have the transformer mounted to the chassis, and you know, the Zenith collector would know that's not right, but for everyone else it looks believable and it's functional. I had to tweak these two a little bit. It was a little bit out of alignment on FM. It just didn't sound crisp enough. Whoops.
Higher death rate than the Nazis achieved against any country.
Anyway, that's again pretty good for FM. I do think I'm going to check the FM related tube, which is this guy. Hopefully it's not something weird. Let me look at the... I had a Zenith that came in recently and it had a tube that is not super common in it. What does it say? 19T8 and 12AT7. Oh, good. Those are super common and I have a lot of them. So I'm going to test those two tubes. Audio is good. AM works great.
Released in the prison for money swap.
National Stadium.
Tonight, only 3 catches for 37 yards.
So that's very sensitive. So if there's going to be any weakness, it's going to be on the FM band. It's going to be this tube, which is, I think that's probably the 12AT7, and this is the 3 section 1. That's probably the 19T8. I wouldn't worry about the rest of these. If this is a 35C5 for the output, I'll probably ultimately replace it with a 50C5. That'll cut down a little bit on the stress of the filaments, and that will also mean that output tube's going to last a little bit longer. Because 50C5 is the same tube, it's just there's 15 more volts on the filament. Alright, I went ahead and tested all the tubes in it actually, and they were all good except for the 19T8. It was a little weak on one of the 3 sections, so I replaced it. And so now we just have a little more sensitivity on FM.
Not a choice.
Good. St. John's Playhouse.
Industrial Boulevard to San Francisco dealing with stop and go traffic.
Oh, I'm dating myself. What was her name? Janet Jackson. Anyway, so it sounds good on FM, and keep in mind this is a late 40s radio, but it's playing modern FM and doing a good job of it. So as far as the radio part goes, we're good. I did clean up the chassis a little bit. I just like it. I know that no one's ever going to see it again. There was another tear in the speaker, so I put a little glue there. I'm using a sticky glue. It's called Lexel. It's kind of like silicone. You don't use something that's going to harden up, or the speaker will not have as much free movement. So now the next thing I'm going to do is add the oh so famous and very controversial audio input feature. Okay, so here's the last thing I'm going to do electrically to the set. We're going to run a stereo jack through the back of the radio and run it through the volume control. To be more specific, we're going to run it to the top of the volume control, which is this little leg here. That is the incoming IF signal, and this is the negative side, which inadvertently goes to negative because we've got a resistor going to ground here. Now, this being a hot chassis set, we need to make absolutely sure that the user's going to be isolated from any sort of current. And you can accomplish that by using this guy here. It's called a isolation transformer. What a clever name. And it has 2 sides. There's like an incoming 120 volt side, which is this side with the pins that are separated further apart. And then there's a secondary side. That'd be your low voltage output. That'd be like 6 volts, 12 volts, whatever. Now, I'm not sure from an engineering perspective why this works, but it does. But we're going to run our incoming audio through the secondary, the 2 pins that are stuck together, close together, and then the primary, which is, I know it sounds backwards, the incoming 120 volts would go in, that's going to go to either side of the volume control. But we also need to have an ability to turn this signal off. That's just the radio signal. So what we'll do is we'll run a little switch that goes up and out, goes to this back here, and that way the user can choose to listen to AM, FM, or they can mute the radio signal and then have audio ring through. And what I'm going to do, I've been looking for a place to put this, and like it either could go there. There's no place really near the volume control. I mean, there's everything in the way, so I think it's going to go here, and then we'll put a switch between this connection like that and that connection to the top of the volume control. Alright, well, I've got the whole audio input system rigged up. We have a shielded cable running from the transformer to the volume control, and then I have a temporary cutoff here for AM. FM, basically you'll just have to turn to AM to use the switch for turning the audio input off and on. But right now I've got Bluetooth running through it. Sounds pretty clean. There's not any pollution or no AC hum. So the last thing I need to do is run a switch wire from that connection here through the back. And then that way we can turn AM off and on. FM will always be on when you turn it to FM. Alright, so the electronics done. Everything's back together again. Got the faceplate back on. This is all nice and smooth. So now it's time to do the last thing, which is take care of the case. At first I thought about maybe painting it, but I think the bakelite's actually in pretty good shape, so I'm going to try to buff this out. I'm going to use my buffing machine and some car wax. You don't want to clean this. A lot of people think, oh, I should put it in the sink and scrub the crap out of it. Do not do that, because you'll remove the casting from the mold and it won't ever be shiny again. These came pretty shiny. I'm not sure if this is going to be the most amazing shiny one, but it'll still look pretty shiny. Okay, well, this is after spending way more time than I care to admit polishing the case. What took most time was getting all these holes cleaned. I remember the last time I did this model, it took forever because I had to use exactly 237 Q-tips to clean them all out. You don't want to take this over the sink and scrub it, because then you'll just ruin the casting and you won't ever get to be shiny again. Likewise, I polished up this, even though I think I'm going to go with some plastic polish on it, still got some scratches. These shrink, by the way, so when you put them back in you have to use glue versus the rivets to hold them in place. The rivets actually popped out when I took them out, so maybe I can just stretch the rivets out a little bit. Likewise, we want to use some plastic polish on the knobs. They're a little scratched up. Little details like that. And also I took the emblem off. I'm going to clean that with some brass polish, and then we'll put it all back together again.